Welcome to Front Office Pros. You may be facing your trade deadline, and if that's the case, Joe and I are here to give you some trade targets for your impending deadline.
Hike!
Joe, we've been talking about trade targets all year long, but this is where it counts. You're getting right before your deadline. This is the last time that you're going to be able to make some trades, more than likely. Most trade deadlines are happening the week of Thanksgiving. So we got 5. We got a bonus player that you and I both really like. We're going to talk about him at the end. But who's your first trade target?
Yeah, first trade target is going to be running back Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Who?
And
Who? I need to clear the earwax out of my ear here. Who?
Nope. It's Bucky Irving, Steve. I knew I was going to take some flack for this one, as I was pretty anti Bucky Irving before the season started.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, we all make mistakes and don't always see things perfectly. But coming out of the bye week, it looks like tides might be shifting over there. I know he's had a decent amount of workload throughout the season, but to me, the most dramatic difference was the fact that he had 6 receptions in this game to, Rachaad White's only 1 for 10 yards. They got similar opportunities in the run game with 12 carries, but obviously Bucky Irving's the more explosive player. Rachaad White has always been an inefficient player in terms of yards per touch. Just a matter of he got so much volume in the passing game, but if he's not going to get that, hard to rely on him. And that's where you got to like Bucky Irving down the stretch. And in terms of, strength of schedule, the Buccaneers have like the best running back schedule remaining on the season. This week, they've got the juicy matchup of the Carolina Panthers, who are currently the worst. Then they got the Raiders in week 14. Week 15, not the best matchup against the Chargers, but they could still possibly run on them. But then Dallas after that, and then in your championship week, if you're able to make it, they get the Carolina Panthers again. So I think this guy's got potential to be a league winner for you with the matchups down the stretch. As ironically enough, Steve, as I keep saying this and talk all these good things about Bucky Irving, and I see you smiling there, you're just eating this all up.
Oh, yeah, Joe, you sound like me about 3 months ago when I was telling you all this stuff about Rachaad White and how you should fade him and that you should be concerned about Bucky Irving. And you're like, nah, don't worry about him. He's a non-factor. I said, all right, Joe, all right.
Yep. Well, it's now the point of the season where Bucky Irving is a factor. A lot of it, has been Rachaad White's injuries too. I've allowed the Buccaneers to see Bucky Irving and what he can do, and there's no doubt there's a dramatic change in terms of who the more explosive players in that. So some guys currently sitting around Bucky Irving in the Draft Sharks trade value chart here. Bucky Irving sitting at 27 with the likes of, Chuba Hubbard also at 27. Got DeAndre Swift at 25 around him, and then guys like Tony Pollard, 29, and Aaron Jones at 35 ahead of him as well.
Yeah, to be honest with you, this is a great pick by you. To be honest with you, I mean, obviously I did like Bucky Irving coming in, but what I like about the pick is this trade value. His trade value, I can't believe it's so low. That Bucs offense is still, even without Godwin, is still producing at a high clip. But what's nice about Bucky Irving is he's a two-way player. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
So I think, I wonder if the trade value chart here is not truly reflective of his true value. I'd be curious if you were to try to acquire him, would you have to give up more for him? That's my only thing. But I understand this is what the chart says, and the chart's a great reference. But just because the chart says it doesn't mean that the owner is going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I would guess you'd have to pay up a little bit more, than what the chart is saying, especially coming off of the game that he had, in PPR leagues. He scored 27.1 points against the Giants, and owners are also going to see the Carolina Panther matchup coming up this week, as well as later in the season. So I do think you probably got to trade up for him a little bit, but I think he's gonna be worth it potentially, especially with that easy schedule coming up for him.
So my number one trade target that I'm telling you to go out and get before the deadline is running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Joe, I got to be honest with you, I'm really surprised as far as his trade value, how low he is. He's currently at 67 compared to You got Saquon, obviously, he's a league winner at this point, but he's at 100. Bijan Robinson, 86. Alvin Kamara, 80. Breece Hall, 79. McCaffrey, 77. Kyron, 68. And then Gibbs, 67. And here's the thing about Gibbs. Really like his schedule coming down the stretch. Bears defense has been somewhat porous of late. Don't know what's happened to them, but they seem susceptible recently. Got the Bears on Thanksgiving. Also have the Bears on week 16. But besides that, you got the Packers, you got the Bills, which, Jahmyr Gibbs is the type of running back that just can absolutely destroy the Bills. I know as a Bills fan, that's one of the things that's the biggest weakness that we have. And he has that electric speed. I could see him just running all over the field. I mean, you see a guy similar to him, right, in a Devon Achane who just tears up the Bills time and time again. And then he's got San Francisco 49ers, on week 17, which isn't the best matchup. But we also have David Montgomery, who, sounds like he might be okay, had that shoulder injury. But Lions have big aspirations, right? They're looking for the Super Bowl. They want to have Sonic and Knuckles ready for the playoffs. So they're 10-1. They're in a really good situation. They look to have the number one seed. I don't want to say it's locked up. The Eagles are kind of around, but they don't need to rely on Montgomery here. I think they might ease him out and kind of give Gibbs more work here down the stretch. We saw what Gibbs was able to do when Montgomery was completely out of games. So I'm not saying that Montgomery is going to be out, but it may not be the 1-2 punch that it has been these next few weeks as the Lions gear up for the playoffs. So I think Gibbs has a possibility for these next few weeks to really take your team over the top and get you that championship. So I would do really whatever I needed to go get him. As I said, the value, I'm a little surprised by the value, but you look at the values around, and like I would definitely trade, Kyron, McCaffrey, Kamara. And the only one I really probably wouldn't trade is Barkley. And then as far as the receivers go, receivers, honestly, it's an interesting year for receivers. It's so funny because beginning of the year when we were thinking about your drafts, we thought that, it's the receivers have now kind of outpaced the running backs, and you should be drafting them in your first round. And, guys like Saquon and Henry they're saying not so fast. It's kind of crazy because the wide receivers have had really kind of a down year. But honestly, I probably would take Gibbs over really any receiver other than maybe Chase, but I don't even know. I probably would rather have Chase, but anybody else, I think I'd be open for discussion. I really think Gibbs can help you take your team over the top.
Yeah, I definitely like the Gibbs pick as well. Especially you mentioned it with maybe they do increase his opportunities with David Montgomery dinged up. To your point, it looks like he's going to possibly play Thursday. That's the other thing. They got a short week too. He dinged up his shoulder. They said he was limited in practice today. Said he could have returned to the game last week, but obviously didn't want to risk anything in that game. But yeah, Gibbs, his value is interesting. It's interesting that he slotted ahead of Derrick Henry too. That's kind of an interesting spot for him there. But yeah, he's the more explosive player, and if he gets more opportunities and touches, that'll be good for him.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. All right, Joe, so who is your second trade target?
Yeah, second trade target. I know we kind of usually go with guys lower in value, but I'm going to go with the running back, Breece Hall of the New York Jets, currently sitting at 79 value on Draft Sharks. I get that people are kind of nervous about the Jets because they don't really have anything to play for, but the one main concern I had was the fact, was Rodgers going to finish out the season? The coaches say they're not planning on benching him. Looks like he's going to be out there. So it gives me a little bit of confidence there that this offense could stay the same and keep plugging away. But his schedule, the Jets got the third best running back schedule the rest of the way. This week they got the Seattle Seahawks, who ranked 17th. Next week they got the Miami Dolphins, week 14, who's 23rd. Week 15, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're 31st ranked. The Rams, week 16, they're currently ranked 19th. And then as you mentioned, Steve, your Buffalo Bills on week 17, potentially in your championship weeks.
Yeah, and we know that week 17, you're going to want Breece Hall against the Bills. I mean, that's going to be a great, juicy matchup for him.
Yeah, definitely. So some other guys that are around him, Christian McCaffrey's at 77, Kamara's at 80. I do think somebody, it'd be interesting if you could possibly trade Bijan for him, just because I know you probably won't like that as much, but these next 2 weeks, like if you're a team with Bijan and you're trying to make it to the playoffs, these next 2 weeks, he's got the Chargers this week and then the Minnesota Vikings in week 14. And those teams are top 5 against running backs. So really bad matchups. Now, if you are in the playoffs, the Falcons matchups get better for your playoffs. But if you're still battling, you got Bijan, might be interesting to, trade Bijan away and go ahead and get Breece Hall.
I do think the deals that we're talking about with high-profile players like a Gibbs and like a Hall, you rarely have I ever seen like a, hey, I'll trade you McCaffrey and you give me Gibbs, right? Like
Yeah, one for one, yeah.
Yeah, it's usually and more cross-positional. Like I'll trade you a receiver and a lower running back for for a Gibbs or for a Breece Hall. I just think, and I would be okay with that. I like Gibbs better than Hall, but I see the logic on Hall, and I think because the Jets have been such a dumpster fire, you may be able to acquire Breece Hall because Brandon Allen's been much more of a factor. Jets have been an absolute circus, so it's a possibility that you might be able to go get him.
Yeah, that was kind of my thing. And then they're coming off of a bye week too. But I know the game before that, he had a really nice game. I just think he's got a real potential to, be our RB. Well, maybe hard to beat out Saquon Barkley, but maybe he can be RB2s on the week.
Yeah, absolutely. So my second trade target is going to be tight end Taysom Hill. I wasn't able to be here. I was gone on vacation while you and Dustin were talking about Taysom Hill, I believe. So now it's my opportunity to talk about him, and I would go acquire him. Look, I mean, his trade value right now is not very high. It's at a 12 right now at the tight end position. And my main reasoning for why I'd be interested in getting him, and he's kind of a lower type player, is I just don't have a lot of confidence in that New Orleans Saints offense. They don't really have a lot of playmakers. With Chris Olave, more than likely was out for the year with everything going on with the concussions. The number one receiver on that offense is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who wasn't even on the team a few weeks ago. So it's like they don't really have anybody. They've got Alvin Kamara, but Taysom Hill is kind of their Swiss Army knife. We use him in a variety of different ways. He's now taking those touchdown opportunities away from Kamara. So a lot of the intrigue that you have with Kamara has kind of dissipated. And the Saints, now you've got their new interim head coach. I forgot what his name is. Rosini, I think. Darren Rosini or whatever. Rizzi, yeah. He kind of gives me Dan Campbell vibes. He's like
Interesting.
I don't know if you talked to him more. He's just this like gritty guy.
Does he clog the toilet on his first day right before this first
Maybe,
game?
but he just seems like he's one of those guys who is like a smash mouth type of. At least that's the vibe I got from him. But
I think he's just a prototypical like football guy. I think that
and Taysom Hill is a football guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's positionless. He's just he just makes plays. So again, that's kind of those are more narratives that I'm playing in my head that give me some intrigue behind him. But the stats prove it too. I mean,
yeah.
What he did last. I mean, he had multiple touchdowns the past week against Cleveland. I mean, he was incredible. And if you remember these past few years, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there have been a few years where Taysom Hill all of a sudden just goes gangbusters. And, it's like you were Taysom Hill, right? Like you thought you were going to win your matchup, and he just goes absolutely off. And I think it could possibly happen coming up. I mean, his matchups, he's got the Rams this week. That's a great matchup. Giants, although they would tell you that it's good against the run, Giants are kind of in shambles. And it's weird because it's looking at him as a tight end. So, when you look
Right.
at, he's more of a running back. That's the thing I am kind of made. I agree with him. He's kind of more of a running back than a tight end. He does get some passes. He's got the Commanders. I think is a good matchup. He's got the Vegas Raiders on your. I mean, I could see him going absolutely bananas in your championship week. So he's a guy I think you can get for the cheap, and I think it might be worth going to get him.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at him from a strength of schedule from the running back position, the Saints are still pretty high in that category. They've got the 10th easiest schedule for the running back position. Really, the main concerning matchup is Week 13 against the Green Bay Packers. Other than that, it's pretty easy road. That's part of the reason why I had him as a waiver. For whatever reason, Dustin didn't like him as much, but I'm glad you're back to reaffirm the Taysom Hill love, and I think he'd be a good trade target for you. And I mean, he's a true cheat code. I think that's part of it. That you play him at tight end, but he gets way more opportunities and touches than an average tight end, and they use him so much. And I didn't think there was going to be a coach that would possibly love Taysom Hill more than Sean Payton, but Rizzy might actually be loving Taysom Hill, at least as much or if not more with the utilization that he's currently has.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, and the thing is like, look at the offense. If you say, well, no, I disagree, Steve. I don't see that happening. It's like, okay, well, who do you see the offense running through? They have nobody. I mean, their receivers, they got
start using Tipton, Bub Means.
Yeah, exactly, right. Or they got Juwan Johnson. He hasn't done anything. Or Foster Moreau. It's like, they don't have a lot to work with. So it's like he is like their cheat code. Like you said, he's the wild card. It's like, we gotta do something. And the NFC South is kind of in rough shape. So I think they're not mathematically out of it. So I think they may still have something to play for. I'm not sure. Is that I know the Falcons are leading by a little bit, and then the Bucs are slightly behind. Are the Saints mathematically out of it, or are they still kind of in it?
Yeah, they're not. They're definitely not mathematically out. They're just 2 wins behind the Falcons in first. So.
Yeah, so it's definitely possible.
Yeah. I mean, they still got stuff to play for, and Rizzy's provided a big bump. The prototypical interim bump. Dennis Allen wasn't doing it for the team, but Rizzy's come in and really gotten the message to him, and they're playing, to your point, more physical and just better football.
So speaking of the NFC South, the last player that you and I both came to the table and said, hey, we kind of like this guy as a trade target. So we're going to give you a bonus here for your trade deadline moves. And that's going to be quarterback Baker Mayfield, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Joe, his schedule is nicey, as John Gruden would say, feeling kind of nicey. The former Bucs coach. He got at Carolina this week. And then he's got Carolina at the championship week. Then he's got the Vegas Raiders in week 14. Chargers isn't the best matchup in week 15. But you got at Dallas, and then like I said, I mentioned championship game week 17. But this guy, Baker, I tell you what, it's funny because a few years ago we said that Baker couldn't bake. Well, I guess he figured out how to do it because, when Pete was at the podcast, he was a big Baker guy. And you and I used to razz him up saying, what are you doing? But we were wrong about that. But, when you look at it, it's like you got guys like Kyler Murray who's been up and down. Even Jaden Daniels. Look, Jaden Daniels has had a great rookie year, but I don't think he's right. I think the rib issue that he's got going on, he's been, other than if he got saved, honestly, by that Terry McLaurin touchdown. Otherwise, he's been putting up a couple stinkers. So to me, I mean, if you look at the trade value chart, Baker really isn't, you're not really asking a lot to go get him. He's only at a 15. So I think he's very much under the radar, and I think his schedule, it's feeling kind of nicey.
Yeah. I mean, that the schedule, and to your point, was definitely a big reason why I wanted to, mention him. But you mentioned his value too, just sitting at 15 with the, you mentioned the guys ahead of him. Then I would take Baker, over those guys as well, especially given the schedule. The only potential concern is he's going to have to get his points early, because, like the Giants, they could get up early and not really need to pass, but he still threw for 294 yards, but and in most leagues, if he's not getting the touchdown, it's not going to be as good. He did get a rushing touchdown, but that would be the only thing is these negative game scripts where they get big leads And, do they just kind of run the ball more and end up hurting them a little bit?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Panthers gave the Chiefs a run for their money, so I don't know. Maybe Bryce Young kind of started to figure things out. Maybe they won't be as big of blowouts. I mean, the Raiders will probably be a blowout. I mean, the Raiders are in really rough shape right now. And then obviously Chargers, we think that's kind of a tougher matchup. And then Dallas, that could be a blowout too. So you're right. There's definitely some blowout potential. That could be the negative with him.
Yeah, but other than that, I still think I'd go ahead and trade for him and take the chance that hopefully, if it is a blowout, they, score early, and he's got finally got Mike Evans back as well, so that only helps him for the rest of the season out here.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about some trade targets to go get before your trade deadline. We gave you a bonus one too, so don't forget that one. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.